Hello, I'm the True Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Super Robot Wars Original Generation is taking me even longer than I expected. Now that's also because I found some of my footage to be corrupted. Had to redo that stuff, that's fun. But today's game, let's ask a simple question. How do you find a game really? Well, for today's case, the third birthday, I found that through Amazon trailers. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, because when you're at school where your mobile data is restricted, it gets very annoying and boring. And weirdly enough, the school Wi-Fi didn't stop me from going to Amazon and watching game trailers. And when you're bored, you'll try to improvise anything for fun. And there's where I saw today's game, the third birthday. I auto-played trailers for games since, I gotta watch trailers for fun or anything. I also got to watch the trailer for Monster Hunters Unite, which is actually very fun to watch. Like, go seriously watch it. Though, let's also talk about the title of the game, because it always confused me. The Third Birthday, that's the name of the game. Why? Is it because it's the third appearance of Aya? That's it? And that's just dumb. That's as dumb as Kojima hiring Gak for a commercial because his name has the letters for DNA, plus a K because Kojima. Wait, that happened? Shit. I would like to also state for the record here that I'm taking this review in a weird direction. That being, I'm going to tell you the twist of the game, and going forward, we're going to see how that twist actually breaks the game's story a bit, because it's really stupid. I also wanted to mention that I'm not spoiling it entirely, but more or less the twist the game's hiding. And the idea would be that I would talk about the problems with that other side of the twist at the end, since it deals with everything at that end. So the twist of the game is that the main character, who is said to be Aya, is not Aya. It's actually her sister, in quotes, Eve. That is our twist, folks. Now you're probably questioning how and why, but we'll get to that in time, and remember, it's really dumb. Also, this guy's our main bad guy. Remember that too, because that twist is also important. Also, would need to stay here because I forgot to mention it. I'm not gonna go over the past games since you'll understand as we go along.
But let's overdive into the third birthday. Yeah, I don't care. That pun was awesome, and I just like puns.
The game begins with the destruction of New York in December 24, 2012. Wait a moment. Isn't that the same year and time frame of the Mayan doomsday myth? Seems out of place, and it's quite strange no one ever really mentions that weird tidbit, as I do like to watch other people's reviews, and in fact, I would like to say now, for the sake of it, these two reviews really influenced this review for just getting that clear. We then cut to a year later as we meet our main character, Eve Freya. Yeah, I'm sticking with that, since, again, you'll get it why it's entirely stupid as we meet our other character, Hyde. It's weird that we don't even bother trying to hide how much of a villain he's going to be. It's just weird, is all I'm saying. I would also mention that we meet a few characters, but spoiling now, they don't do anything. In fact, you can remove them all entirely. Nothing would be literally lost. We don't get any times with these characters, and I mean, they decide to call one of the characters Blank.
Blank. That should tell you the amount of not caring they put into this game. Which is a lot, apparently. And we actually don't learn anything about them, really, except in one place. That being the data logs. And I refuse them to call them anything other than that, since they serve no real other purpose than to explain the story that they couldn't be bothered to actively explain. I mean, hell, for example, this character here has a kid, but it's only ever explained in the data log, because if you only follow the dialogue, they would say no, he didn't have a kid.
So our target is this towering thing in New York called the Babel. It's weird they actually called it something like that. In fact, the title for this video is actually a twofold joke, but I'll explain that at the end because it'll make sense when I get to that. And we also have to fight these things too, called the Twisted. And they are wreaking havoc to everything, and they must be defeated with the help of Eve Freya. Actually, how the hell are we supposed to beat them?
Reprogramming codes, I can do. But you're the only one who can reprogram the past.
I'm sorry, what? that would imply that you know how to time travel and know how to do it.
Aya, can you hear me? You're in the past.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I'll just ask the simple question because it feels like it's always ignored in any other review I ever seen of this game. How does Eve do this exactly? I mean, how does the game actually bother to explain away Eve's having these powers? I mean, they never even elaborate on how she even learned to do this to begin with. Well, sorta, but not what I mean. I mean, yeah, she had amnesia and was taken in by the government and trained, but they never elaborate on how it fundamentally works. It's quite annoying, to say the least. And that's really the issue of this game. They never bother to explain this, just expect you to accept it.
In fact, if I may go on record and actually go on a minor rant here, skip to this time frame, to skip over my rant on time travel.
Let's just also be clear about this. I'm not a time travel fan. I just don't like it. I've seen it done okay, like Chrono Trigger and Back to the Future. They were good, I think. A pity then that most time travel stories I've seen have done it piss poorly. A good example of this, in my opinion, is Dragon Quest XI. A great game that's really good until the time travel stuff just comes in out of nowhere and just ruins all the character development. But the biggest example I got for it is Final Fantasy 13-2. That story is just dumb. It's a confusing mess that just doesn't make any sense. I don't need to really explain that it's easy to fuck up and hard to do well because there are just so many minor elements because you just got to explain how it works. Or else, no one will buy into it. Sorry, rant's over, let's just keep going. Okay, I am a bit half-joking. They do explain how they're changing the past, but it's still stupid that they don't really explain it. You see, they're sending Eve's consciousness to the past, and she's possessing some soldiers and basically making whatever mission they were on a success, so that means they could have more forces to them to handle the Babel in New York. That's the idea I've got. They don't even bring up the idea of how they even figured this would be a thing they could do. They just say they can. And again, to repeat myself, just expecting you to accept it without the due diligence to allow it for it to work. So anyway, they send her back to the past, which is called the sacrifice incident, which I'm at a loss of why they call it that. I think it's in the data logs, but I'm not sure. Again, they don't explain. And we might as well go over the gameplay, which I feel like I'll be barely talking about, but at the same time going on for it for too long. This game's a third-person shooter, and not a cinematic ARPG. That was dumb, Square, and you should feel dumb. Because at least movies know how to get to the point and get their points across easier. You're probably wondering, well, if they didn't have a second analog stick to aim, how did they do that? Well, you don't need to aim, really. By holding the L button, you can actually lock onto an opponent. And actually, by pressing it, you can reset your camera as you're moving along when you're not locked on. Which gets annoying, but is the only way to do it properly unless you want to do the dreaded claw. Nobody likes the claw, people. And when you're locking onto an opponent, by tapping the R button, you can shoot whatever gun you have on you. You can get free guns at any time, with the first one always being your pistol with unlimited ammo, which sucks. Literally every other gun is better than it, power-wise. I would also like to ask how the hell she's getting these guns and ammos, which is just confusing, as one of the things the devs were aiming for this game was realism, which this game does not achieve at the fucking slightest. Anyway, she's also able to use the gun of the person she's wearing when she dies into another unit, which she can switch at any time by pressing the triangle button to any other unit nearby. But if they die, you will die unless you switch out quickly, which is an interesting mechanic to have, and having that fork gun can be useful at times. Though most of the time they do suck because they can be upgraded, and how and why they can be upgraded, there's no reason given. I mean, there's a guy here like this guy, and no, I don't know what his deal is. I really don't give a crap. These upgrades can increase these stats here. Like, I get handling and range, but they don't actually explain what these other stats do. I mean, I'm not saying that upgrading your weapons is bad or anything. They were just barely enough to say it's worth it. Just, I wish I understood what these stats did. Personally, I would just say that the selection of these weapons is kind of pointless, as why not just give us one type of gun each? That way we have variety and also have the ability to choose and how we deal with these situations, so that we don't need to take one certain gun for a stage, even though that most of the stages will actually give you a person who can use a weapon like that. But still. And if somebody says because that's not realistic, I mean, it's not realistic that we're able to carry free guns of any type and have one that has infinite ammo. I'm just saying go the full mile. And I mean, hell, getting new weapons to begin with is already annoying as is, as you gotta find the guy who has the new weapon and just grab onto him. And if you didn't know he had one, well, too bad. You gotta do it again. Though it's not helped to gather them is a bit hard since the AI is a bit inconsistent at times. Sure, some of them will actively do stuff, but sometimes I've seen them just stand around doing nothing. I mean, like, the few times I actually saw them go into cover and firing on them. Oh, yeah, right. There's a cover mechanic where you can actually, like, stand behind cover and they'll shoot at the enemy, which is good. Also, if you have soldiers who are in cover and you're locked onto an opponent, you can charge a bar called linkage as you lock onto a foe, and you can actually order them after the bar is full by pressing R1 to fire on that opponent, which activates something called crossfire. Wait a moment. Did no one make the obvious joke?
The ultimate challenge. Crossfire. Crossfire. You get caught. Crossfire. Crossfire. You get caught. Crossfire. 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 You'll get caught up in it.
But I mean, like, why would you do so when you could do so easily yourself? By doing so, you can actually deal enough damage to make them unstable for a bit, which will allow you to overdive into them and deal massive amounts of damage, which will easily reset the bar, but you can, like, easily refill that bar too. And sometimes it can get annoying to fill unless you're using a shotgun, because shotgun's a man's best friend. But it still is annoying to refill regardless. It also feels like the only way to damage some foes as their HP is way too high. I had to wonder what the devs were thinking, as what would this help when the core issue is that I can't actually deal any meaningful damage on my own without the overdive mechanic. Which is ironic when the game also gives you another mechanic that you would think would be all about doing so, dealing that lot of damage on your own. But in fact, the only mode that I feel like is mostly useless, as it doesn't allow for the use of it that often, that being Liberation Mode. It's essentially useless, as the mode doesn't last long enough to justify the mode's use, and in fact, the only time I ever used the mode much was for a boss, so you can actually damage it, which is annoying as hell, because you have to wonder why they thought it was okay to do so when the game never tells you to do that for this boss. Took me an hour to figure it out on my own. I mean, the difficulty of the games is hard to even determine since the game doesn't have a real core scale since, I mean, like, yeah, most of the stage can be normal or just at least bare bones easy, but then you reach this one enemy here who is just annoying to fight because he has way too much HP. I mean, there are also levels, but I don't care much because they didn't really affect anything really. I didn't feel like they affected anything. And I haven't even talked about the dumbest mechanic in this game. I'm not even joking. I think it's honestly dumb. Like, I don't even know what the hell made them think this was ever okay. That being the DNA board. You will mostly ignore it, or at least at some point you will. Because of one reason. Most of these abilities are useless and don't activate on demand. That's because the abilities may activate. Yeah, most of these don't activate when you want to, you just have a random chance of getting them to work. Which, no. Basically, these abilities give you some sort of bonus depending on what you're doing. Like crossfiring, when you do that, you can possibly heal, or when you overdive into a unit, you can actually restock on ammo or heal a bit. That's if you're going into a soldier, which the game never tells you that that's how it's supposed to be used and not with enemies. Which is just dumb because the game doesn't even tell you the difference. And that is the real problem. I cannot rely on them at all. They are abilities that just may work. I mean, like, there are abilities that do stuff like building up crossfire faster, or that crossfire can deal more damage. Yeah, that's good, because you'll always want abilities that can work 100% of the time, rather than may work. Because, you know, you'll want certainty, because dealing with randomness is not always a good thing. Hell, even upgrading them is annoying, because if you want to upgrade them, you'll have to mutate them until you get good results, which can be annoying as hell, as you'll be only all doing this. And I mean, yeah, you can possibly link these abilities together to get a higher chance of them to work rather than individual cells, but again, hardly matters when you can't get them to activate to begin with. And I mean, like, I've heard that the levels actually affect how often these abilities can go off, but doesn't really matter. Honestly, I have nothing else left to talk about much about the gameplay. As my friend said to me, basically, gameplay is basic. There is a good concept here, but anything that makes it cool is immediately shot in the head and not allowed to do anything. Well, I actually lied. There was actually one other mechanic that I didn't mention, and originally didn't put it here because of one reason. I was so annoyed by it that I mentally forgot. I'm being very serious here. That being the clothes and ripping mechanic. For some baffling reason, they made it so that Eve's clothes fall off after she gets hit with some attack. That's going to happen regardless, and the only reason it exists is because the devs, or more notably, Nomura, wanted that mechanic in the game. And it's really dumb when you think about it. Seriously, did they forget about the twist they were having? What the fuck? Did they forget they were going to have the twist of, Aya being a 12-year-old girl? The fuck? I'm more attributing this to sheer incompetence than rather full-on, yeah, they were okay with this. I mean, I'm more annoyed at the thing about the realism part of thing. Yeah, I'm still going on about that, since they wanted to say this is realism, even though the game even outright states that, no, she doesn't look like that at all times. She looks like a normal soldier when she's possessing someone, so what the fuck?
And that's really all I got to go on, and I would go back to the plot, but that's the weird thing. Nothing happens that's meaningful. Like, I could skip right to the end, since nothing really meaningfully happens. Like, nothing would change the story or how it would play out.
For this section, it's all spoilers, since I really cannot figure out a way to make it sound coherent without making it also sound insane. Honestly, it was even kind of hard to show why Eve's twist is kind of stupid, because there's so much stupid that you had to wonder a lot of things, like, what was Hyde's goal? I mean, what was up with everything he was doing? So I'll try to explain what happened, but it still doesn't make any sense to me. So basically, Hyde's goal is to go back in time to time 0, where all this stuff started, and it explained that at the wedding of Aya and Kyle, I'll get to them in a moment, they were shot by a SWAT team, and Eve, in shock of all this, somehow overdived into Aya and somehow created this time 0. By overdiving into Aya, she accidentally somehow, I'm not entirely sure how this worked, shattered Aya's soul all throughout space and time. That became the Twisted. Yep, and it gets worse. Somehow. As somehow Eve lost her memories. Not because of the trauma of it all. No. They were just somehow left behind in Eve's body, and they became the High One. Why, I don't know, and I really don't care, but also, the people of the game are the High One, to be clear about that. And actually, this has been on a repeat for a long while, except Hyde wants Eve to absorb him, so that when it repeats, she becomes stronger and somehow becomes a new creature, but Eve's like, no way, man. Even though he's like really creepy and doesn't see that, Hyde's plan just goes to plan B as he just tried to absorb her. Why wasn't that plan A? I don't know. Though that hardly matters, as Aya just comes in and shoots him. There is no answer for why. She just then also tells Eve, for some baffling reason, to just shoot her so they can just end this, and she does. End game. Roll credit. I mean, there's more after that, but none of that matters. At all. Yeah, that was a lot of nonsense, and trying to explain it all would be pointless. And explaining what happened before that doesn't really matter, because it didn't matter. I mean, we get betrayed by this guy, and he does nothing. I mean, he literally dies anticlimactically off screen, as I have to wonder, what was even the point? I mean, the game also, for some reason, also has this.
You're still alive. It's a pity losing someone like yourself. But you no longer exist.
Even though he didn't believe in the time travel nonsense. So what the heck, game? And this again, cheese, nothing. I mean, even after this, we have another betrayal that makes even less sense, since somehow he's here, but also the CTI building, which makes no sense because you can't be time traveling without an overdive system, unless it was just convenient for the plot to do so, which happens way too often for this game. And here's why I mentioned the Aya is E thing and try to explain why it doesn't work. Mostly because, again, I'm trying to explain a lot of things, but if I don't mention that stuff, because I can't really make this flow all nicely, It's mostly because the game doesn't, for an instant, convey in any manner that that's how it could even be an answer. For multiple examples, on one occasion we see Eve's body just walking around. What's the deal with that? It just literally goes nowhere and stops appearing by the second betrayal. In fact, Emily, yes, I am literally naming an off-screen character, or just this character right here, because she does nothing. I was led to believe she was possessed by Eve, was calling her sis, since she did say sis, which makes no sense because she would not be possessed by Eve because we're possessed by Eve, and it can't be Aya since I will not deal with that. I am not dealing with that. One could say it's her memories that was thinking of Eve was Aya, which there's no proof for that to even prove that that's even a way to answer this. We also have to mention the massive contradiction that is Kyle, who I don't get, since at multiple times he seems to not know and know things at the same time. I mean, he says and calls her Aya at multiple occasions as though in shock that why would she be here at times, or like he doesn't know. I mean, every time I look at his dialogue, it seems contradictory, though that might be just due to the confusing goal of Hyde to begin with, since I don't get his goal. Yes, his goal is to trying to go to time zero and becoming the next stage of evolution, and also he can spread his power to others. I guess. I'm not entirely sure because the goal still makes no sense. I mean, the game, like I keep constantly saying, gives no explanation of why things are the way they are, just are. It's kind of lucky I actually decided to just rewrite this, because during my time of rewriting this, I actually found this bastard, which actually answers some of the questions, but raises those same questions too, which I don't even have time to get into, and to be fair, I don't accept it in FF13. Why the fuck would I accept it here? I mean, earlier I started and talked about how Hyde is actually spreading his power to others. The only character who actually says that is Maeda, which they made him out to be a fucking Hojo clone. Oh, how I wish I wasn't. Somehow they made him out to be the creepy scientist guy, and it comes hard to watch some of the scenes he's in because he acts so creepy towards Eve, and it's even weirder when Eve's okay with it. But I think the sadder part is that if you realized it, it becomes really hard to not notice it. This is the only time she acts like a fucking human being. I'm not kidding. Think about any other time she doesn't really talk, she just listens to them. There's no dialogue, she doesn't ask questions. She just listens to them, saying nothing. Throughout the game, she acts so submissively, it barely makes her out to be a character, just an avatar that we inhabit that, quote-unquote, looks sexy. Yeah, I don't find Eve attractive. Now, Bayonetta, now you got my attention. The issue is fundamentally, she's not a character. She doesn't really do anything in the story that makes me want to say, I hope she gets what she wants. It's shocking the writers didn't even bother to write any dialogue for her most times than not. We don't know anything about Eve as a character. I mean, what do we really know? Nothing really. We don't get any of her likes, dislikes, we don't see her hopes and dreams, her hobbies, or even thoughts on things she's just not given anything. And they want us to care about her, or anyone for that matter, when nothing is established about the characters. Now, you would say, well, what about the past game? Well, that's the weird thing too. They happen, but it didn't happen the way those games tell you. It's weird, and I know it's strange. I'll try to explain. Because some people say that Time Zero affected the timeline, but that doesn't really work again because that's not how time works. I mean, granted, there was licensing issues, but they were still able to use all the characters from those games and also mention the game's events and hell, even the mitochondrial powers. And they are mentioned in the weirdest place. The manual. Yeah, ain't that weird? I'm surprised no one ever mentions that. Though it goes back to my point. Anyone can point at the big moments, but it's always the small moments that show you how truly bad something is. I'm not saying that those big moments aren't a good example, but small moments just make the issue way more noticeable. I mean, the Hyde plan and Time Zero still makes little sense. I mean, I explained Hyde's plan, but it's a bit obtuse because how he wants to get his goal is actually confusing. I mean, what's the point of destroying the CTI building? I mean, seriously, why? From my understanding, he needs Eve to be alive and to do the things she can do so that he can get to the Great Babel of New York. Because seriously, how is crippling Eve helping his goal in any matter? Unless you think Kyle did that on his own, which makes no sense since he would be controlled by Hyde, though then again, I can't be sure of that info since it came from Maeda, who couldn't possibly know this shit. So what the heck? I mean, I haven't even really mentioned Time Zero. Like, I still don't even know where Eve get her overdrive powers from. This just feels pointless and comes from nowhere. If you don't justify the reason it doesn't work, or why it works or doesn't, I'm not gonna believe you. I barely went over Aya in this game, and she's only here for like 5 fucking minutes. That should tell you how much this game matters or cares about anything. And I mean, like, all she does is kill Hyde in the most anticlimactic way. Yeah, don't let us kill the main bad guy. Let somebody else do it. Just the fuck. Ironically, this game reminded me of FF13 way more than I meant to earlier. I say kinda because at least some of the Parasite Eve games were good. I mean, the similarities to FF13 plot is a little too much. Nothing happens that really matters. The main bad guy is anticlimactically finished off as the game ends with a Deus Ex Machina. Hell, Hyde looks like him too, for Jesus fucking Christ. The last part I want to talk about, at least for right now, is the subname of The Babel with a question mark. It's a joke on 2 levels. It's a reference to Metroid Other M, a game that ruined another game series that it never kinda really recovered, as there's not been any mainline games in the Metroid series, and I don't count remakes. And MP4, yeah, I'll believe it when it comes out, okay? The other one is a language joke, since the word literally means confusion. That's really is the game in a nutshell. Confusion of what it's doing, what it wants, and why should I care. In the end, the game story is laughable. The only aspects that are decent are the music, which is pretty well done. And I mean, like, Eyes on Me by Superfly is really well done. I really like it. And the graphics for the game were really impressive. Though, it's a pity then it's all on boring story and gameplay. See you all next time.